Welcome everybody to this webinar, The Facts on Nutrition Labels. My name is Dina Dugan. I am a registered dietitian at Baystate Noble Hospital. I am a clinical dietitian doing inpatients and outpatient counseling as well. I graduated from Framingham State University. I got my bachelor's degree in 2020 and my master's degree in 2021. Just want to get a couple of things out of the way first. I wanted to talk about allergies. If you are allergic to any of the foods that will be discussed in tonight's presentation, please do not eat them. Also, I wanted to do a little disclaimer to tell you that the information presented is for educational purposes only, and it is not meant to diagnose or treat or cure any condition. Everything that we're talking about is going to be based on an average healthy individual, and it is not appropriate for me to be giving any kind of individualized nutrition advice in this setting. So let's get started with a little tiny history about food labels. So up to the late 1960s, there was little information on food labels to identify nutrient content of food. Meals were generally being prepared at home using basic ingredients, and there was really little demand for information. As time went on, processed foods were more and more produced, and around 1969, the White House Conference on Food and Nutrition and Health asked the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, to consider developing a system for identifying the nutritional qualities of food. So in 1972, the information that was on packages was basically voluntary, except when nutrition claims were made on a label or in advertising or when nutrients were added to foods. So in 1973, the regulations were finalized and the FDA wanted to include calories, grams of protein, carbohydrates, and fat, and the percentage of the RDA of protein, vitamins A and C, a bunch of B vitamins, calcium, and iron. Sodium, saturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats could be included at the manufacturer's discretion. And everything was to be based on an average serving size. So what you're seeing here would be an example of a food label from 1975. And if you're as old as I am, you remember this. And not every food out there had a label on it. But if you were lucky, you could see that this had 120 calories, and it was made of 25% grape juice. Hooray for real grape juice. In 1990, the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act was formed and required all packaged foods to display nutritional information. And because it takes us forever to do things, that actual label didn't appear on foods or on products until 1994. So tonight we are going to review nutrition facts labels of the more modern day. We're going to look at the ingredients labels on food, talk about food label claims and labeling terms, and a new proposal that is coming out for 2025. So out with the old, in with the new. We have our two nutrition facts labels as they appeared in 1994 and then revised in 2020. So on the left here, we have the 1994 label, and then on the right, we have the 2020 label. So there are some key differences to these two labels, starting with the serving size. They made it bigger print, they made it bold-faced so that it would call your attention to it. However, in my practice, especially with outpatients, almost no one ever looks at the serving size. So good try, FDA, but not many people are looking at it. The next thing that they changed was the calories from fat from the 1994 version label was removed. We don't have that anymore. And as we learned in our previous webinar on healthy versus unhealthy fats, the quality of fat is more important than the calories from fat. And so that is really why that was removed from the label. The next thing that happened was they updated the values of the daily values of all the nutrients. And then they added a new footnote at the bottom to explain what the daily values are. The percent of the daily value is how much one serving of the referenced food contributes to the adult needs of someone who's consuming 2,000 calories per day. So based on that 2,000 calories, this is how much percentage wise these individual nutrients are contributing to your total needs. The 2,000 calories is an average total, which may not meet the needs of all people, but it's kind of like straight up the middle, and it's just a nice round number. So they also included this brand new line called includes added sugars. So you always want to think of added sugars as sugar from the sugar bowl. It's added to a product like a recipe, and it is included in the total grams of sugar. So where you see it says total grams, or total sugars is 12 grams, includes 10 grams added sugar. So what that really means is 2 grams were natural, 10 grams were added, and they equal a total of 12 grams. So you don't have to add those together. And that very often is something that people are confused about. So always just look at the added sugars and realize that that is added like a recipe. Think of it like white sugar from a sugar bowl. The interesting fact about that is that for every 4 grams of added sugar equals 1 teaspoon of sugar. So for this product that has 10 grams of added sugar, all we have to do to find out how much that equals in teaspoons is to divide 10 by 4. And you would see that it is a total of 2.5 teaspoons of sugar in this product for the 2/3 cup serving. What is this product? I don't know. I have a feeling that it's probably some sort of granola type cereal based on the nutrients that I'm seeing. So if you figure 2/3 of a cup is not that much, and you might eat more. If you eat more, it's okay. You just need to understand exactly what you're eating. So for 2/3 of a cup, you have 2.5 teaspoons of added sugar of whatever this product is. So the next things that got revised were the vitamins and minerals. So you see that they used to be vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. And now they are changed to be standardized across all packages, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. And the reason for that change was these are the 4 nutrients that we Americans tend to be deficient in our diet. So they put them on the package. They changed them to vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. So you need to pay attention to that serving size, like I just said. The serving sizes are listed in English measure and in grams by unit and or package. So a unit could be like a slice of bread. A package would be like a single serve package of something like a potato chips or something like that. Serving sizes were updated to reflect the portion that most people are eating. The nutrients and percentages are based on the serving size that is listed, and you need to compare the portion that you are eating to that which is listed on the label. So some products you might find a label that has an additional column. If a package of food can reasonably be eaten as 1 serving, like a can of soup, then the per container column is added. And so what's interesting is you can see if you have 1 serving, which would be, it doesn't even say 8 ounces. I'm sorry, 1 cup. So dietary fiber is listed as less than 1 gram per serving. But if you eat the entire thing, you actually can see that you're getting 2 grams of fiber. And the same with the sugars, less than 1 gram. But if you eat the entire package, you have 3 grams of sugars. So if you're going to eat the entire package of something, sometimes this does not tell you the entire story. So when it comes to the daily percent daily values, the 520 rule comes into play. And you can use this to determine if a nutrient is high or low. So based on 2,000 calories a day, if you have 5% daily value or less per serving of something, that is going to be considered low. If you have 20% daily value or more of something per serving, that is going to be considered high. So the things that we want to strive for would be 5% or less of saturated fat, sodium, and added sugar. And then for the things that we'd like to strive for more of, 20% or more of, would be dietary fiber and your vitamins and minerals. So this is an example of a label for frozen lasagna. And if you take a peek at this, are there any nutrients that are high, or are there any nutrients that are low? So we do see that they are high in saturated fat, sodium, and calcium, and it is low in added sugars and vitamins. And while we're happy about the added sugars, we're not so happy about the vitamin D being low, and we are happy about the calcium being high, but not so happy about the sodium and the saturated fat. So that's just an easy way to use those percentages to decide if something is healthy for you or not. So another thing that is listed on labels is the ingredients. Any food that has more than one ingredient has to be listed on the label. The ingredients are listed in descending order by weight, and they are required to state if food products contain any of the 9 major allergen foods. One of 2 ways to see if something contains allergens is it has to be listed in parentheses next to the ingredient. Like it is here. There's this flour, and then it's followed by wheat. Or it has to have a contains statement, and it has to list the allergy that is contained. For tree nuts, are 9. We have 9 major food allergens, and they are milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soybean, and sesame. So when they're listing the ingredient, or when they're listing the allergens, they have to put it either in the parentheses here next to the ingredient. So flour is actually made of wheat flour. And then there's the contain statement, which says it contains wheat. The may contain statement means that the equipment is shared to make different products, and cross contact may be occurring. So if you are very allergic to one of these 9 major allergens and it may contain that, then you do not want it. So that brings us to gluten. Gluten is derived from wheat, barley, and rye. Barley is most often processed into malt, which is used as a flavoring in many foods. Gluten does not have to be listed as an allergen, and gluten-free is a voluntary claim. So we see on this can of soup that it contains barley, but on the contains line, it just says soy ingredients. It does not have to say barley, but we know that barley has gluten. Gluten does not have to be listed. On the other label, we can see that it contains wheat flour, and right next to that, it says malted barley flour. It's a little bit cut off, but it says flour. And then again, down at the contain statement, it only has to list wheat. So if you have a gluten intolerance or gluten allergy, you have to be very vigilant to read labels to make sure that there are no gluten containing ingredients in there, because again, it does not have to be listed as one of the major allergens. And the reason that I'm talking about food allergies right now is because it's an epidemic. 1 in 10 adults has allergies, and more than half of them have had severe reactions to their food allergies. 1 in 13 children have food allergies, and more than 40% with the food allergies have experienced a severe reaction. So just some statistics on that from the CDC, 3.4 million ED visits yearly because of food allergy. 203,000 ED visits of those 3.4 million are acute reactions, and 150 to 200 deaths each year are coming from the severe food allergies. So we're going to now move on to food label claims. The FDA has strict guidelines related to nutrients. They have strict guidelines related to food-related terms and health-related terms. You can see some of those here, such as vitamin D and calcium are going to promote strong bones. Oatmeal can help reduce cholesterol. Something is made with all natural ingredients, a good source of fiber, a good, excellent source of omega-3s, and something that is light in sodium. These are all examples of these food label claims. So we'll start with sodium. So when a package is labeled reduced sodium, it has to contain 25% less sodium per serving than the original version. Low sodium must contain 140 milligrams or less sodium per serving. So we can see low sodium over here on a hint of salt in things. This Spam, I have the greatest examples. The Spam is 25% less sodium, so that qualifies as being a reduced sodium product, even though they didn't put it on the label. And then salt-free or sodium-free products must contain less than 5 milligrams of sodium per serving, and it can contain no ingredient that is called sodium chloride. So next up is fat. Reduced fat must contain 25% less total fat per serving than its original version. Low fat must contain 3 grams of total fat or less per serving. Fat-free must contain less than 0.5 grams of fat per serving. And for saturated fat, the guidelines are reduced fat, of course, is 25% less than the original. Low saturated fat would be 1 gram or less per serving. And a saturated fat-free product would have less than 0.5 grams per serving. So just a little sidestep into how much fat is in my milk, because people argue with me all the time that they're drinking low-fat milk, when maybe they are, maybe they aren't. So for whole milk, 1 cup has 8 grams of fat per cup. 2% reduced fat milk has 5 grams of fat per cup, and that meets the criteria of being 25% less or a little more of the original version. 1% low-fat milk has 2.5 grams per cup. And skim milk has 0 grams per cup. So which one is considered low-fat? Based on the guidelines that we just learned in the previous. That would be 1% low-fat milk. 2%, while it's reduced, it's really not a low-fat milk. So now we will move on to sugar. Reduced, again, is at least 25% less than its original version. Low sugar is not a defined term in labeling. Sugar-free equals less than 0.5 grams of sugar per serving. And no sugar added equals no sugar or sugar containing ingredient is added during processing, but it may still contain artificial sweeteners. So the FDA actually has criteria for foods that are labeled as healthy. And they have 3 categories of individual foods: seafood, game, and meat, and meal or main dishes. So for an individual food to be labeled healthy, it has to have 3 grams of total fat or less, 1 gram or less of saturated fat, 480 milligrams or less of sodium, 60 milligrams or less of cholesterol, and at least 10% of the daily value for vitamins A and C, calcium, iron, and fiber. And so you can see it's pretty straightforward across the board how those measure up in the different categories. I think the biggest difference would be here in the main dish or meal, that if it's a main dish, it has to have 2 of the meet 2 of these criteria of having at least 10% of the daily value for vitamins A and C, calcium, iron, and fiber. And if it's an entire meal, then it has to meet that criteria for 3 of those things. And so as an example, Cheerios, my favorite yellow box Cheerios, meets the healthy criteria, even though it doesn't even say it on the front of the box. It absolutely could, because it meets the criteria. Low fat being 3 grams or less, and it has total fat of 2.5. Low fat or low saturated fat of 1 gram or less, and it has 0.5. Sodium less than 480 milligrams, and the sodium is 190 milligrams. The cholesterol, 60 milligrams or less, and it certainly meets that at 0. And at least 10% of the beneficial nutrients, vitamins A, vitamin C, calcium, iron, and dietary fiber, which is 14%. So this really is a very healthy. So our nutrient claims, something that's called high in or excellent source. It has to contain 20% or more of the daily value of what it is, of that which it is claiming. And it can be used on meals or main dishes to indicate that the product contains a food that meets that definition. So here on this cream of wheat, it says excellent source of vitamin D, calcium, and iron, and 5 plus 5 essential vitamins. So it has to actually meet this criteria to use an advertising. When a product says good source of, it needs to contain between 10 to 19% of the daily value of that nutrient. So this says good source of protein. So it contains that. May be used on meals or main dishes to indicate that the product contains a food that meets that definition. Other nutrient claims: more contains at least 10% more of the daily value of whatever they're referencing per serving than the reference food. So this almond milk has 50% more calcium than dairy milk. So that certainly meets that criteria. It can only be used, this term can only be used for vitamins, minerals, protein, dietary fiber, and potassium. So our other nutrient claims of lean on seafood, game, and meat products: less than 10% grams of total fat, 4.5 grams or less of saturated fat, and less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol. On mixed dishes that are not measurable with a cup, like a sandwich, a burrito, pizza, things like that, it has to contain less than 8 grams of total fat, 3.5 grams or less of saturated fat, less than 80 milligrams of cholesterol. And if it is marked extra lean, then it needs to contain less than 5 grams of total fat, less than 2 grams of saturated fat, and less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol. So then when our products are are claiming to contain antioxidants, there has to be an RDI, recommended dietary intake, has to be established for each of those nutrients that are the subject of the claim. And existing scientific evidence of antioxidant activity has to be documented. So in these pictures, we have dark chocolate, and don't we all love our chocolate? Dark chocolate has polyphenols, flavonols, and catechins, and the higher the cocoa or the cacao percentage, the more antioxidant it has. Artichokes are chlorogenic acid, which might help reduce certain cancers, type 2 diabetes, risk of heart disease. Green tea has polyphenols, that's a great antioxidant. And berries contain anthocyanins that help to protect against heart disease. So then we come to our structure function claims. These are claims that relate to a specific body function. So you can see on the airborne, it helps to support your immune system. And then on the probiotics, we have it naturally helps support digestive health. So those are structure function claims. They're always accompanied by a disclaimer, and you can kind of see it on the very side of this airborne bottle on the left. And it's always in a little box like this. It says these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Then we have our disease risk reduction claims, which are statements that a food or supplement can reduce the risk of a disease or condition. And they are based on current scientific studies, evidence, and must be reviewed and approved by the FDA before it can go on the box. So the claims that are on our Cheerios, my very favorite food, is that it says can help lower cholesterol as part of a healthy heart-healthy diet, and it has the seal of approval from the American Heart Association. I think it needed a little more wording, such as the fiber can help to lower your cholesterol. However, you get the gist. It's got a big red banner telling you how great it is. And then on our bottle of calcium, it says supports bone health, and it may reduce the risk of osteoporosis. And that's a proven fact, just as a higher fiber diet can help to lower your cholesterol and thereby reduce your risk of heart disease. So these are proven things. And obviously, disease risk reduction. So now we have some more terms. Now the term natural, which appears on the Nature Valley granola, 100% natural. So to be natural, it has to have no artificial ingredients or colors, and the ingredients that are listed have to be able to be found in nature or on the shelf. Next, we have organic. USDA organic, certified. Food that is grown without artificial fertilizers, pesticides, or growth stimulants. Meat and poultry and dairy products from animals that have not been given antibiotics or growth hormones. And there's more to the organic certification than just those two things. You know, it goes into protecting your natural resources and managing the land and animal welfare needs and using renewable sources. You have to keep impeccable records, go through inspections, and you have to obtain a certificate. And that certificate can cost, depending on the size of your establishment, it can cost a few $100s, it can cost a few $1,000s. And that is why organic is expensive. It works. So then the next term would be proprietary blend. So you can't quite see the whole word, but this said proprietary blend. And you're typically going to find that on some sort of supplement. Not necessarily a straight vitamin or mineral, but on one of those strange blends that are out there. So what proprietary blend means is that it's a specific mixture of ingredients, but they're not going to tell you the amounts. The quantities and the ratios of things are considered to be a trade secret. So all they have to tell you is that it contains a proprietary vitamin. So then we come to superfoods. The FDA has no legal definition of a superfood. So don't be fooled. It is a marketing term that describes a food that's high in nutrients and may have health benefits. So this is our new proposal coming up. Proposed for 2025 is front of package labeling to have at a glance information so that you can be at the grocery store and you can observe similar products side by side and instantly be able to see if they are high, medium, or low in saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. We already established that low equals 5% or less of an ingredient. High equals 20% or more of an ingredient. Not really any specifically set criteria for medium other than it falls somewhere between 6 and 19%. So they're specifically picking on 3 things, and it's going to be straight across every package. Saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars. Now, the reason that we are picking on these things is because when they're consumed in excess, they can lead towards an increased risk of disease. So saturated fat, that can increase your LDL cholesterol. The LDL cholesterol is the one that gets us into trouble, that raises our total cholesterol. It's the one that starts to create all the problems, get embedded, create the plaques, and lead us towards that greater risk of heart disease. Sodium, we're picking on sodium because that is associated with high blood pressure. It can be associated with osteoporosis because it increases calcium excretion from the kidneys. It can play a part in kidney disease and in heart disease. And then added sugars, because too much added sugar, what happens? We gain weight. So we have the increased risk of obesity. We have the increased risk of tooth decay, and we have the increased risk of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. And so my vote is to put this on the label to them. So in summary, and do not sign off because we have something after the summary. We were talking about nutrition facts labels, all the parts, everything that's been updated, the ingredients labels and how they play out, the allergens and the importance of labeling things so that people know exactly what they're eating. The food label claims of nutrient structure function claims, disease risk claims, and have the terms and terms and more terms. But don't go away because we're going to put our knowledge to the test and we're going to make an informed decision. And this is based on a question that came from the last webinar on dietary facts. So is it better to drink cow's milk or plant-based milk? So let's use what we just learned to figure out which one is better. So these are 4 plant-based milks that are the most common ones that are in the grocery store. We have almond milk, oat milk, soy milk, and coconut milk. So which one is better to drink? Any one of these or the cow's milk? Well, in order to figure that out, we're going to have to do a comparison. And what are the nutrients that you think of when you think of milk? For me, what I think of first is calcium. Second is protein. And then just for giggles, we're going to look at the fat. So here we have the 4 labels. I'm not going to tell you which is which yet. We'll just call them A, B, C, and D. And we're going to first compare the calcium. So we have our calcium in milligrams and we have our calcium in a percentage of the 2,000 calorie a day diet. So label A, we have 450 milligrams for 35% of our daily value. We have label B, which is 350 milligrams of calcium and 25% of our daily value. Label C has 300 milligrams of calcium and only 20% of our daily value. And then label D has a mere 130 milligrams of calcium and only 10% of our daily value. So then we will look at protein. Protein of label A has 1 gram, label B 1 gram, label C has 7 grams, and label D has 0. So are you getting an idea of which one could be better for you? And then we're going to look at the fat content. Well, we have to look at a couple of things in fat content. So label A is 2.5 grams of total fat and 0 grams of saturated fat. Label B has 0.5 grams of total fat and 0 grams of saturated fat. And label C has 4.5 grams of total fat, but only 0.5 grams of saturated fat. And label D has 4.5 grams of total fat and 4 grams of saturated fat. And it's 20% of your daily value, which we would label as high. So, which one do we think is the best choice? And I will now reveal which label belongs to which milk. So label A was almond milk, B was oat milk, C was soy milk, and D was coconut milk. So which one do we think is the best choice based on the calcium content and the protein content and the fat content? I would choose soy milk as the healthiest choice. So let's take that soy milk and compare it to cow's milk. Cow's milk is here on the left, and it's 1% low fat, and then soy milk is on the right. So we have, as far as calcium goes, we have 300 milligrams of calcium, 25% of your daily value on the cow's milk. And we have 300 milligrams and 20% over here. And I don't know why that percentage is different. It shouldn't be, it should be exactly the same. So we're going to just say it has the exact same amount of calcium. It has very close to the same amount of protein. It's off by 1 gram, but that is really negligible. It has 2.5 grams of total fat on the cow's milk, 4.5 grams of total fat on the soy milk. However, it's 1.5 grams of saturated fat on the cow's milk and 0.5 grams of saturated fat on the soy milk. So I would, because we know that we're looking at saturated fat as the thing that we want to limit more so than the total fat, I would have to say that the soy milk is probably a more like low fat-ish milk. However, what is the answer? And just like I said in the last webinar, it depends on the goal. So therefore, if you do not like the idea of soy milk, you're not going to drink it. You're going to drink the cow's milk. If you are lactose intolerant, you are not going to drink the cow's milk. You might drink the soy milk, but you also might drink one of the other plant-based milks. If you have a soy allergy, you will not drink the soy milk. If you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you would not drink the cow's milk. So it really just depends on your goals. And so because, are you drinking that much milk anyway? For me, I use almond milk and I put it in my coffee. That's all the milk that I have in a day. So again, the whole answer is it just depends on your goals. And that concludes our webinar. And these are my references. And I thank you all for joining.
Well done, Dina. That was fabulous. I learned quite a bit, and your examples were terrific. I really liked your comparison quiz at the end too. It was terrific. I think I guessed the right one at the end. So this is a great time to mention that if you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A box, and Dina has some time that we can go through any. Is there a health risk of drinking the soy milk and other soy products?
Are you referencing perhaps breast cancer? That is really a question that you should put to your doctor or your GYN, because I know that there are some studies that say that having a high intake of soy supplements can increase your risk of breast cancer. And then don't quote me here. It's either if you're in menopause or maybe you're doing hormone replacement therapy, but I'm not an expert on that. But again, it was soy supplements. It wasn't the soy food. So I haven't read up on that recently, so I don't feel that I can accurately answer that, but that is a question that I would pose to my doctor.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question, how important is dietary cholesterol in foods when one is taking a statin?
It is not really important because, and as we talked about in the last webinar, cholesterol is not really a nutrient of interest. The FDA and USDA wanted to take it out of the food pyramid recommendations the last time they were revised, because they did realize that 90% of the cholesterol in our blood is manufactured by our liver. So that could mean that it is nothing to do with your diet. Only 10% of what we eat is affecting our blood cholesterol. So where is that coming from? That is coming from the saturated fats. And saturated fats would be any fat that is solid at room temperature that you can see with your eyes at room temperature. So if you think of like a stick of butter, you would unwrap it, put it on a plate, and you'd still see it at the end of the day looking just like you unwrapped it, because it is solid at room temperature. So other things that are solid at room temperature would be like the fats that are on meat. So, you know, the recommendation there is to go low with your saturated fat. Try not to make it more than like 10% of your calories. For sure, even lower if you have a high cholesterol and a higher heart disease risk. Or, so, you know, if you see fat on your meat, cut it off and don't eat that. If you have a ground meat, you can switch from beef to turkey or chicken. You can also do the lower ratio of like a 95/5 or 93/7. I'm actually not sure. I'm not a ground beef person. I love ground turkey. It's ground turkey everything in my house. But you know, it's very simply try to eat the leanest bit you possibly can. It's the saturated fat that's really affecting our cholesterol levels, not so much the cholesterol that's in the food.
Excellent.
And I know that I did reference it a little bit, but those were the FDA guidelines that I was reading back to you, and they need to update those. But those are the current.
That's great info. Thank you. Great question. The next question, what's the most common mistakes people make when reading labels?
They don't look at the serving size. And when I ask my outpatients, I always ask them, do you look at your nutrition labels? And they go, oh, yes, I do. And then I show them a picture and I say, okay, so what do you look at or what are you looking for? And they'll go, oh, calories, yes. Like, okay, well, let's show you some things that we should be looking at. And it was the same, and I don't know if I can make these go backwards. It was kind of the things that we always focus on are these three things that we were talking about. These are the things that I'm always harping about, picking on, because these are the things that are connected to disease. So the other parts, you know, they're great to look at. I mean, calories, sure, look at calories, but if you're having something that's low in saturated fat, then you're not going to have are low in fat, period. It's not going to be a very high calorie food necessarily. And if you're going low in sugars and low in sodium, it's just like a more healthy product. It's almost like this cascade of events that happens. And it's like, oh, the happy accident is this food is low in calories. But, you know, that's calories is not even something that I'm necessarily looking at. when I'm doing counseling, because I don't want people to be too hyper focused on counting those calories, because we need calories. We do. It's another word for energy, and they get a bad rap, just like a potato. But it's like you have to put the energy in. You can't put nothing into your gas tank and expect it to go 100 miles. But we put nothing into our bodies and expect our bodies to go 100 miles. And so we respect that car, but we don't respect our bodies. So I never harp on calories. I just try to steer people towards better choices. And if looking at the saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars is steering you to a better choice, then that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Excellent. Thank you. Great feedback. The next question. Where would somebody find a list of all the ingredients in preservatives that are unhealthy? For example, the red dye.
I would start with Google, and then I would see what pops up, and then I would consider the source. The FDA is a good source. The .govs are a good source. Cleveland Clinic is always a great source. Harvard, Mayo Clinic, NIH is a great source. The USDA is a great source. You know, you just have to consider the source. If it's someone's blog, I don't tend to give it much thought.
Very good. The next question, what's the impact of eating more than 100% of the recommended nutrient, DV specifically?
Overall impact of it, I mean, you gotta remember that the daily values are based on the 2,000 calorie a day diet. Don't dwell on them too much, because that 2,000 calorie a day could be more than what you need. It could be less than what you need. But you can use these DVs, the daily values, to determine if something's high or low in a nutrient. So I wouldn't be too concerned that I'm going over that. So, like, if you noticed that protein didn't have a percentage, and the reason for that is there's different qualities to protein. You know, are you going to say, I got 100% of my daily value of protein from something that's not a good source, like bacon? Sorry, bacon, I love you, but you're not good for me. You definitely don't want to do that. So there was a couple of labels shown that had a percentage for protein, and that's completely voluntary. And that's if the manufacturer feels that their protein is of a good quality. So people just, they have different needs. So I wouldn't take these numbers as gospel. I would just try to do the best you can with the choices that you're making.
That's great advice. And it's great advice to wrap this webinar up. Dina, you gave some great advice, some great data, and some really exciting changes to labels for 2025. I thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for your great questions and for joining us.